now, there's depression, there's personality disorders, dementia. And so it is a battery of mental health disorders that are wrapped up into this crazy person or this loon tune, which prevents us from seeking the treatment that is necessary. Next slide, please. Chris, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, so which is a perfect opportunity to then, focus on self-assessing. So a lot of times we are trying to establish whether or not a person is dealing with, mental health, and so, or just their well-being overall mentally. And a lot of times there's different cues that you can find, whether it's internally or that you just notice that they're dealing with externally. So you may find that some people are a little rash when they speak with you, or they're more aggressive. It could be body language, the way that they carry themselves. Are they slumped over? That could be a sign of depression. Facial expressions, holding tension in your face, and looking a certain way, reacting a certain way, can be trauma that they've experienced from a younger age. Shutting down quickly instead of assessing the situation at hand. These are just various ways that you can self-assess and say, looking at this list here, are there any of these here that I can relate to, right? Do I find myself zoning out or daydreaming constantly? Is it hard for me to prioritize and focus on one thing at a time? Or in that thing that I'm focusing on, how much attention am I giving it? And is it either benefiting me or making things worse? That could trigger into your work. It can also fall into your schooling for those that are, currently in school. So this has long legs to it, if you think of it in that way. Changing the subject, right? Because a person has always dealt with not being able to address what's in front of them. And it's easier for them to just kind of, glaze over what the problem is at hand. And then as you can see, allergy symptoms can also be something that is triggered or a result from a mental health condition, or just having some type of trauma that they're dealing with that affects them mentally, that has a physical reaction to your body. And as well, clock watching, these can be sound or come off as very minuscule, but they have lasting and very impactful effects on the body as well as your mental health. So again, this is just another way for you to say, and self, not necessarily self-diagnose, but self-identify whether or not these are some cues that you're experiencing for yourself, or maybe some loved ones that you know. All right.
Absolutely. And I would just add, the body has to let it go. If you've ever been driving and someone just cuts in front of you or cuts you off, turns in front of you, your body naturally tightens up. It's going to tighten up. You're going to hold the breath. That release for some people is just a release of the wheel. And for other people, it's all right. We're yelling, we're screaming because we have to get it out. Very much like animals. If you've ever been around dogs or cat, when they get overexcited, they're going to have to stop and they're going to have to shake because our bodies have to release it. The way that it's released can present itself in varying ways. And oftentimes those ways are not to the side as, oh, maybe I have a cold coming, or maybe I'm just allergic to this, or maybe I'm just emotional today. When really it is our body signaling to us that something is not right and I need to tap in to see what's going on with me.
Absolutely. And which is a good point that also leads to, barriers that a lot of people will end up facing because of not addressing some of those cues, right? It may be shared trauma that you're dealing with, it's preventing you from moving forward. It can also be a shared culture. And I know specifically for African Americans, we have a lot of shared norms that necessarily shouldn't be a norm. And that can be going back to systemic racism. It can be to historical traumas that have been hereditary, right? Whether it's relationships or the behaviors that you've experienced, those can hold you back from moving forward in life. And they ultimately become a distraction because now you're giving all of your time to it, or you're giving your time to the ways to cope with some of those different traumas, right? And we'll talk more about, some of those different solutions that people may take that are not necessarily solutions, but are distractions and detrimental to their health. Anything you'd like to add, Talia?
No, just really recognizing the shared culture most often, and because our people, African Americans, have had to stuff When we look at taking Black History Month into consideration, in order to survive, people had to compartmentalize. And so it's been passed on from generation to generation because we've been in fight mode, flight mode for so long that it is, if I can just get through, or if I can just get to. The reality is the only way to get to is to go through. And so we're going to have to unpack and say, this is not okay. I need to deal with it so that I can get to the me that I'd like to be.
Absolutely.
Next slide.
All right, so next we have financial wellness. Now, this is a big part for me, and I'm sure that it is for most people, especially when we're hearing more talks about being in a recession. So let's talk about some of the stresses of money, right? There's the stresses of not having any money, and then there's the stresses of not having enough money. And then there's the stresses of the money that we would like to have, right? So there's different tiers that money can fall in that can directly affect us in multiple ways. Some of those ways is depression. Sometimes we may see, the successes of others, and we may, look at them and envy them, and that leads us to depression because we're thinking, well, am I not doing enough? I see that they're doing this over there, they're getting this amount of money, and it's like, what can I be doing differently? And it's like, had I gone to school, or had I, what I mean, not messed with such and such, or had I just said no to this relationship, maybe I'll be better off, and maybe I'll be able to make that amount of money that I, decided that I could have made back then, right? It leads to depression. It can lead to anxiety because then you find yourself trying to play catch up, right? You're finding yourself spreading yourself thin, trying to do everything in your power to get to that amount of money that you feel will make you happy. But then that can also lead to substance abuse because then we have to figure out a way to cope with the stress, figure out a way to cope with the anxiety because we're constantly thinking about it. So what better way for me to take my mind off of things and maybe smoke this little weed or, drink this little Hennessy because you know what? I just need a moment. I need to take this break. And so just to kind of further expound, if you're feeling low or depressed, or you may lack motivation to manage your finances, and I can attest to this, that anytime you find yourself in a position where you're in that comparison mode, especially in this day and age of social media, and you're looking at everybody's going after the bag, or, you see a lot of people with the come ups, they got vending machines, they got this YouTube channel, and you're figuring out, well, where do you stand in all of that? It may put you in a place where you find yourself just constantly focusing on the lack instead of, focusing on what you could do. And so it then leads you to having a lack of motivation to manage your finances. You're thinking, well, I'm going to always be in this place, and it leaves you not feeling motivated to make a change. Spending money is also another form of stress, right? We figure, let me spend some more money because that may make me happy, right? Spending money may bring you a brief high. You might overspend on something that you don't necessarily need. And so it's very important to be mindful of the importance of spending money or overspending money just to get a temporary high of, that I have this money, but it's not necessarily money that should be going towards this, this Gucci bag or, this steak dinner, just things like that. You might make impulsive financial decisions when you're experiencing mania or hypomania. This is a really good one because impulsive spending is something that we can all attest to, and it's done in multiple ways. It can be impulsive spending when you're out with a group of friends, right? And you see that everybody's spending money on something, and you're like, in your mind, I really shouldn't even be out to dinner right now. I know we brunching, but I really only need to just be getting an appetizer, but I just got this full meal because you don't want anybody questioning whether or not, girl, you got it, or bro, you all right? So this affects your mental health because now you're going against your morals. You're going against what what you need to do versus what you're getting ready to do. So this affects your mental health. It goes beyond your mental health because now it directly affects your finances, which then leads you back to that depression, that anxiety, because you have to figure out where to get that money that you just spent. So there's this reoccurring cycle that's found where you're now trying to play catch up. You're now depressed because you should have made that decision about spending that money. So again, ways to kind of cope with this whole feeling of, stressing out about money is building out a plan. And we'll talk more about solutions further down, but I do want to reiterate that they're implementing a solution, budgeting, and looking at ways to manage your money so that you can enjoy your financial, freedom, is making sure that you are disciplined with your money. And ways of going about that, being disciplined with your money can also alleviate some of that depression and anxiety, because you may have anxiety in other areas in your life, but let this be one area that you can control. So in addition to that, you might want to also avoid doing things um, to stay on top of your money, like opening up bills, checking on your bank account. And I know I've done this, especially in college, where it's like, you know what, I'm gonna make this $20 stretch. I mean, this is the last $20 I got, so I'm just gonna ball out this $20 and just be like, whatever, and I'll figure it out after the fact. But you may want to avoid doing that, because again, that $20 can be used for something, or it can be an emergency $20 that you need to apply to something else. So just be mindful of that. And also, everybody experiences this, so you're not alone. And so my final thought with this slide is just being aware, and don't allow yourself to be influenced by other people. Do what's best for you. You know what's best for you, because again, money can lead to stress, and we live in a capitalistic, society, and where everything is about money. So you just have to be able to be disciplined and really take control of your financial wellness. Anything you'd like to add?
No.
Gotcha. All right. So next up, we have emotional wellness. Now, with emotional wellness, a lot of times we don't think about how relationships impact, our total well-being, right? So some common relationships to, make sure that we point out are family relationships. There's multiple dynamics that are found within family relationships, even friendships. You may have acquaintances, you may have romantic relationships, you may have strictly sexual relationships, and a lot of these can be intertwined, right? But the impacts of these relationships can have long lasting impacts on your mental health, your physical health, your financial, well-being, because it's case by case, right? But the most important part is the trauma that it leaves behind. Depending on whatever type of relationship or family dynamic you have, I can speak to, examples in my own family that I've seen in my aunts, right? You may have that one auntie that may have dealt with something, in her teenage years, but you can see that till this day, it still has an effect on her, how she speaks to people, her energy when she's around people, or her energy when she's around men. Those dynamics, those impacts of relationships have long lasting effects. So you have to really address the types of relationships that you currently have, because it may be detrimental to your mental health, but as well, it may be influence you to make the wrong decisions. So one that I like to really hone in on is the romantic relationships, because you can find romantic relationships at work. You can find romantic relationships through friendships, and sometimes not by choice. There are, uh, I don't know how to really frame this, but it's not romantic relationships, but sexual relationships by force through family, because that's a real issue. I know
Absolutely.
I can speak to that, in my family. We see these in movies, we hear people talk about it, but it's a real thing. And you have to be able to address it. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's a sensitive topic, but that's one of the realities that a lot of people face. The impacts of relationships, whether it's by choice or not, will have a detrimental effect on you. So, think about, well, what kind of relationships can I control, right? Those are the ones that you really want to prioritize and figure out which types of relationships do you currently have, and which ones do you feel that you can let go of, so that way you can move forward in life. Because again, this all revolves around total well-being, right? Does this relationship with such and such help me in any way? Or is this person just holding me back? Are they positive? Do they motivate me? Are they looking to see me win and succeed? Or are they only there to criticize? Or are they only there to see how far I make it to just tell me, oh, I told you so. I told you weren't going to make it. You know what I mean? So you have to be mindful of the type of relationships you have. Or you may be in a relationship where somebody's just simply using you. And it's hard for you to let go of that person because you feel as though you owe them something, or you feel like you're their savior. So just be mindful of some of those different types of relationships and how they impact on you. All right. So with that in mind, we have a very in-depth experiment that we would like to start with right now. And so, you know what, let's do this. I'm going to read through these different questions. And as I read through these different questions, I want you to be honest with yourself. I want you to be open. And I want you to really take your time to think about these. Now, I've done this myself, and I tried to shortchange myself because I said, "Oh, they asking me all these personal questions. I'm not going to answer these questions." But then I realized after the fact that I really wish that I would have answered these questions honestly, because the only person that's going to know the answer is you. So I want to make sure you are aware of that. These questions that I'm reading you, no one's going to know the answers but you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. And I would just say, we encourage you to write it down, and you're not going to have to share these answers. I did want to make sure that you're aware. Write the question, the answers down, your responses in order with the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but you're not going to have to share it with anyone.
That is correct. So be honest, don't overthink, and do this for yourself. Okay. So I'm going to assume that everyone is ready and they have their pen and pads ready. Okay, number 1. I want you all to think of 3 negative characteristics of the people who raised you. Think of 3 negative characteristics of the people who raised you. Okay. Give you guys a second. Now, I want you to think of 3 positive characteristics of the people who raised you. I want you all to think of 3 positive characteristics of the people who raised you. Okay, number 3. What did you long for as a child? As a child, what did you long for?
Just as some examples, it could be more love, feeling like your voice was heard, more money, more freedom, more happiness.
Number 4. How did you want to feel as a child? Number 4. How did you want to feel as a child? Okay, and now number 5. How did you respond to frustration?
With that frustration, you can also include anger. How did you respond to frustration or anger or sadness?
Okay. So we hope that you all chose some really good responses, because now Talia is going to follow with some questions that are going to reiterate what we just went over now.
All right. Again, no one is going to see your responses. I'll give another moment just for you to review the questions, see if you want to add anything to numbers 3 through 5, if you want to make any changes to 1 and 2. We want you to be intentional in this activity and honest with yourselves.
You'll be mad afterwards if you don't. Trust us.
All right. We're gonna assume everyone is ready. For number one, the actual question, and we want you to think about either romantic relationships that you're in now or that you were in the past before you grew, or in a relationship that you're in that's been long term, but what did it look like at the beginning? Number one, I am attracted to someone who is. Finish that with what you wrote. Number two, but I want him, her, or them to be. Finish it with what you wrote for number two. Number three, so that I can get what you wrote for number three. Number four, and feel your response to number four. And number five, but I stop myself from getting the love I want by.
Okay, can you run back 3 through 5, please?
Absolutely. Number three, so that I can get. Number four, and feel. Number five, but I stop myself from getting the love I want by.
This is very interesting.
Absolutely.
Very much so. Very much so. Oh my God.
As long as we are open and honest, the reality is we are really safe answering the first five, but it takes a certain level of vulnerability, transparency, openness, and honesty with ourselves to be able to answer the actual questions. And that is because, again, just the cultural systemic nature of America at large, and then brown Americans to stuff, to brush it under a rug, to not deal with it, to keep it inside. Everyone doesn't need to know your business. Even larger, these are questions that are formulated out of a therapeutic model called imagotherapy. But had we said, we're going to try this experiential therapeutic activity, a lot of the stigmas associated with mental health would prevent us from doing so because we put up that natural guard of protection. It is only in letting that guard down that we'll be able to live our fullest lives. We can't get to who we need or want to be if we're stuck being who we used to be.
And worrying about what people think who we are becoming. Because I'm telling you, what their opinions do not matter. I mean, you're growing.
All right.
So before we move forward, I got a few amens and
oh, thank you for monitoring.
For folks that were just in the chat. But so for those that were sharing in the chat and that kind of unmuted themselves, what was your natural reaction after going through the second set of questions? And please, anyone can share at this time.
I just think the way the sentence is formed after I answered the first part and then the second part, it was just like, wow, this is too this is too right on.
Yeah.
To make that much sense with the correlation, not knowing what the second set of questions or part of that sentence would be.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? No pressure. Just wanted to make sure that I'll open the floor.
I kind of looked at it as from not a personal relationship with myself versus someone else. Like, you know, the things that I'm attracted to, instead of like not the person or what I may be attracted to through a person, but for myself. And I'm looking like, oh my gosh, you know, like this for real is like a blueprint of the pattern of my life. And, you know, from a personal, not so much with the outside relationship, but with my inward person. It's real deep.
It really forces you to address some of those things that we haven't quite addressed, right? Because it's so easy to just, you know what, I'll put that on the back burner. I got things I got to take care of over here, you know? So good. Thank you. Again, thank you all for sharing these. Really great. So we'll move on. All right. So
Social health at large, again, just to tie it all together, a part of emotional well-being and really making sure that our relationships are healthy, appropriate, satisfying, and positive. We want to make sure that there are balanced friendships. Of course, there will be times in a friendship where you need to show up a little more because your friend or significant other is in need. But we also would expect reciprocal exchange. When you're in need, they're able to show up for you as well. A couple of ways to stay socially healthy. We wanted to remain culturally sensitive and aware by just grouping it as spiritual groups. I also don't want to minimize myself. For me, that means faith, my faith groups, whatever that means to you, making sure that you're tapping into spiritual groups. For those that are younger, as you're encouraging them, Girl Scouts, women's groups, retreats, again, teen groups. And then, although it does say at the bottom, no drugs or alcohol, also just making sure that if that is a choice, that it is in moderation and not an extent that could become habit forming or addictive. Next slide.
all right. So now at this time, we're going to get into physical wellness. All right. So as we all know, we usually tend to set New Year's resolutions at the beginning of the year, but it always, sometimes it doesn't quite work out that way, right? With staying consistent. However, physical well-being does have a huge impact on your mental health as well as your total well-being. So some of the benefits of taking advantage of your physical health is freedom from certain diseases or abnormalities. The body functions as it was designed to function. But then also it allows your body to take full advantage of what it was made to do, right? And that's to support you, because throughout life and throughout different cultures, our physical health is directly benefits or, or is harmed based off of our day-to-day activities, right? And if we're stressing every day, you'd be surprised some of the physical conditions people are in because they stress, right? They may not consume alcohol, they may not do any drugs, they may eat a great diet. However, because of stress, it's having a physical toll on them, to the point where their body is now breaking down because it cannot deal with the stress, right? So, prioritizing physical health is really going to be a way to alleviate some of the stresses that you're dealing with. Now, some of those different total well-being sections that we were focusing on, whether it's spiritual, financial, when you work out or when you're exercising, you feel different. Your mindset is different. You begin to see the world different. I was a vegan for like 6 years, and I'll tell you right now, I was looking at the world totally different. At first I was looking at meat like I wanted to just bite as much meat as possible, starting out because it was really hard to do. But I realized that I needed to make a physical health change. And so once I did that, I realized that, I had a clear mindset. I was able to get a lot of work done. I began to really prioritize what other things that I can do. I began to be more disciplined with other areas in my life, and to the point where it increased value for myself at work, at home, with my wife, so in just various aspects. So again, I can't stress enough physical health and the importance of it. But tips toward a physical healthy lifestyle, it's simply eating right, exercising, drinking water, no drugs or alcohol, but if it is alcohol, in moderation. But the most important one is sleep and getting rest. Sleep and rest, I feel like, are two different things. You could be sleeping, but you're not resting. I think we live in this hustler society. Everyone is going after whatever ambition or endeavor that they're working towards, to the point where they're sacrificing sleep. They're sacrificing rest. When you lay down at night, you may be asleep, but your mind is still thinking about all of those things that you got to get done, or all of those things that's on the list, or the relationship that you're currently in that's stressing you out, or the bills that are due. And so what you have to remind yourself is, not right now. In this moment, I owe it to myself to get rest, because when I wake up in the morning, them same issues are going to be there. So at least if I'm rested, I can approach them in a different mindset, where I might find something new, a newer solution to handle those circumstances. And I'm telling you all, sleep, or I should say rest, is very important, as much as exercising, as much as eating right. Because you can be exercising and eating right, but not getting enough rest, to the point now where your body's working overtime, and that directly affects your heart. So you also have to keep in mind that, and then eating foods in moderation are going to also have a huge impact on your mental health, because that directly affects the choices that you make. That also stems with the financial, because if you are eating, out all the time versus cooking, you're spending more money, right? So you have to factor all of those things in, because at some point they will factor in without your choice. So bear in mind.
Absolutely. And oftentimes, just to tie it back, really making sure we don't overcorrect. Again, when we look back at just the things that have been passed down from generation to generation, oftentimes the food that's in our communities were because we were given last as brown people. Given last. And so when given lemons, they learn to season it right, to make it taste good. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it was the healthiest. And you want to do things in slow changes. If you try to do it all at once, it's set up for failure. Step by step, to make the lifestyle changes. And when we look at the exercise, we don't have to go and run marathons. Sometimes it could just be a walk around the neighborhood, just making sure that there is some movement. And so being cognizant of those huge impacts that could also occur from an overcorrection. We want to make progress, and slow and steady is still forward movement.
Absolutely, it is. So again, especially for those that are in that stage in your life where you are slow and steady, please continue on. Don't let anyone knock you off that path. You're doing the right thing, right? So if you haven't heard it yet, if nobody's told you, keep going. You're doing a great job.
Absolutely.
All right, so solutions.
So necessities of self-care, we really want to look at this life balance wheel. And again, although WHO only outlines mental, physical, and social, we're really looking at physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, and professional, which also lines up with financial. And so there are several different, we won't go through all of these because there are quite a few in each domain, but making sure that you're picking out what works for you. Right now, there's been this moving trend of say affirmations. Affirmations doesn't work for everyone, especially if they're in their mind. I don't really believe this. I don't want to say this. You have to choose those things that work for you, not just going with the trends, but really prioritizing you. Okay, I tried it for a little bit to see if it could work. It didn't work. I'm still in the same place. Let's pivot and move to the next one, as opposed to giving up and forgetting about that domain. Next slide. So wellness professionals, there are several that would fall under the mental health, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. There are medical and mental health social workers, counselors, therapists, coaches. Sometimes it isn't that there is a true mental health or emotional health concern as much as I need someone that is going to coach me in the right direction and hold me accountable for those things that I said I wanted to do. And I'm struggling with holding myself accountable. Reaching out for help is not wrong. It is okay to say, I can't do this alone. I need to reach out. And sometimes in our relationships, we're giving pieces of the story to our friends or pieces of the story to our families, and their responses are not as objective as we would prefer. They're subjective to what their pain is, whereas one of these professionals are very objective and they're able to provide. There's a safe zone. You're able to tell the whole story, and they're able to provide some fully informed guidance towards what is needed for you as an individual.
Yes, I agree. Just to piggyback off that a little bit, there's freedom in being vulnerable with people that won't judge you.
Absolutely.
And I highly, encourage for those that feel that, you're only giving, one portion of the full story to those folks that you feel, would care enough to hear, the circumstances that you're dealing with. Definitely look into professionals that's their priority, that's their job, that's what they get paid to do. They go to school, they spend a certain amount of years of training to make sure that you're receiving the feedback that you're looking for, so that way you can get beyond that hurdle that you're currently dealing with. I highly encourage for anyone that's looking or considering, but what I also want to make sure that I address is, if you are kind of hesitant because you're not sure of how people will perceive you, keep it to yourself. Be as discreet as possible, because again, your self-development to get to total wellness doesn't take anyone else but you. So, again, you're doing this for yourself and the ones that directly are affected by the change that you make in your life. So I want to make sure that I just said that. All right. So taking action, you have to take action. One of the things that I like to do is I always tell myself, okay, what's the problem? Okay, I've identified the problem. What have I done that hasn't worked? Okay, and now let me try and take action towards something else, right? So taking action with physical health resolutions can include attending a workout class or participating in exercises regularly. Finding a accountability partner is really going to be beneficial. And as you can see, there's a few additional ones here. For mental health resolutions, that could be scheduling regular therapy or counseling appointments. So, definitely lean on the professionals. There's websites available that provide, Black mental health counselors. So, because I know that's a thing. I know people that have come to me and said, hey, could you recommend, a Black therapist, or whatever the case may be, or a Black social worker, because I feel like they can identify with my circumstances than someone else that isn't within my immediate culture, right? And then social health resolutions, volunteering once a month at an organization of your choice. I think that's a really good one, because that can also help you find motivation towards your purpose. You may say, well, I've been meaning to do this. I want to do this. I want to revisit this. This is what I feel like I'm supposed to do in my life. Find whatever that is. If there's an organization that does it, volunteer. And I guarantee you that social health can lead to mental health, which then can lead you to making different choices in your physical health. They're all tied together. And then making small talk with your neighbor whenever this one is case by case, right? Not everyone has a relationship like that with their neighbors. So, but again, these are just some solutions that we feel are beneficial, and ways for that you can start taking, action and making some small steps now, with some examples in front of you. All right.
Absolutely. And the only thing that I would add is giving yourself permission to say no. No is a complete sentence, and it does not require an explanation. Can you go? Can you come? Can I borrow? No, 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 no. Giving yourself permission to say, I need time for me so that I can show up the way I'd like to show up when I am interacting with you. Really giving yourself that permission to prioritize you.
That's it. All right, now at this time, that concludes our presentation. So we now would like to open it up for questions and answers. So please unmute yourself. This is a round robin. If you'd like to just say a few words, if there's anything you'd like to share, now's the time. Was there any takeaways that anyone had that they felt was like, that was the thing that I needed to hear tonight?
I would like to, I don't know, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Something I took away was the giving yourself permission to say no. I feel like saying yes is just so much easier. You know, can you go? Yeah, of course. When back in your mind, you know, you really don't want to go.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna take that for myself. That was definitely a nugget I'm gonna put in my pocket for sure.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, please say no. Say no. Say it loud, okay? Because I'm telling you, sometimes people will, try to, hold that over your head. It's like, why you say no? Like then they say you're changing and things like that. That's fine. Let them say those things. Because again, you have to prioritize you. So good for you.
Hey y'all, this is Ty. I just wanted to piggyback off what Ash said. I definitely relate to the struggle with saying no a lot. I'm a people pleaser. I've learned that more and more over time. So that's something I got to work on continuously. So I'm just gonna keep trying. I feel that 100%.
Nice. Thank you for sharing.
I think something that really stuck out for me is you all pointing out some more of the signs of going through different things, even as far as like the sinus issues, different ways to identify that you're going through certain issues at a certain time, just to be able to be better cognizant of your mental, emotional, and physical health at all times.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so again, so we some takeaways were, empowering your no's, feeling more confident and comfortable saying no, and regaining your power in that way. I really appreciate you all's time. It's not in vain. We really appreciate you all spending the time with us to really hear us out, because we prioritize and we are very passionate about making sure that these resources are available first and foremost, but that more and more African Americans are able to really focus on themselves, because there's so many things being thrown our way left and right when we think that these are things or issues that our parents or our ancestors were dealing with. It just finds new ways to resurface and infiltrate our day-to-day lives. But I empower you all to take full advantage of being the best version of yourselves. We're board members at the Pillars of Hope, and we really just want to say thank you, and that you guys are amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank
too.
you.
You all.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Oh, we got money, financial wellness. I know that's right.
Daddy.
Yes, ma'am. I'm coming. I'll say
We
good
can
morning.
stop record.
Okay.
Let's see.
Second, okay.
Okay.